Welcome back, Defenders. The war in Ukraine is officially changed. I don't think the mainstream media understands exactly what this means, but this is very bad news for the Russians, and this is going to be incredibly disruptive to the rest of the world. Ukraine is now doing this. Russia-bound tankers hit by explosions off Turkish coast. 2 oil tankers under international sanctions for transporting Russian crude exploded within an hour of each other off Turkey's Black Sea coast on the 28th of November, forcing the rescue of 45 crew members. Successful Ukrainian naval drone strike disables 2 Russian Shadow Fleet tankers. These are the Shadow Fleet tankers Kairos and Virat, and they were sailing through the Black Sea on their way to the port city of Novorossiysk to fill up. Ukraine would never strike a full tanker. That would be an environmental disaster that would affect Ukraine. But when they're empty, sailing towards Russia, why not take a shot? What does Ukraine have to lose at this point? So these are shocking developments because this impacts everyone. What do you think they're saying and doing in China right now? That one of the Shadow Fleet tankers that was chartered or paid to deliver oil is now not going to be delivering oil. There is a video or an audio of the tankers sending out an SOS. They requested assistance and rescue from the Turkish Navy, and here's the broadcast.
Lütfen yardım edin. Drone attack, yani bir drone.
There's also video on the tankers. This has been released by the crew. These crewmen do not look Russian, but I assure you, Russia owns all of these ships, and their captains are also probably Russian. And I want to say that nobody was injured, nobody was killed, everyone was safely evacuated. Yes, there's oil in the water on fire, but that's the oil to propel the ship. It's not the cargo of the tanker. So I can link this video down below if you want to see and experience the fire on board for yourself. In addition, Ukraine released the drone boat video. These are Sea Baby drones, and they deliberately targeted the engines in the back of the ship to disable them. I don't think it was Ukraine's objective to sink the ships, just to disable them so they can no longer travel and export crude for the Russian states. Here are the pictures showing the damage. Big hole right there, big hole right there. I don't know how many of these drones slammed into it, but it was at least 2. Multiple per ship. And Russia has a serious problem. When I woke up this morning, this was breaking news. A 3rd Shadow Fleet tanker, this one registered under Senegal. This is the Mersin, and it's currently listing. It's taken on water and it's now partially submerged. I'm guessing they also had to request help from the Turkish Navy to come rescue them, but the war is now different. If Ukraine is going to start doing this to Russia, and Russia is going to somehow retaliate for Ukraine doing this. If you want more information, I'm going to recommend the fantastic YouTube channel, What's Going On with Shipping. Our friend Saul put out a 20-minute video this morning breaking down all the details of these Shadow Fleet tankers being struck. I'll link it down below if you want more information. But big picture, this is an idea that I suggested here on the channel more than a year ago. Because once again, what does Ukraine have to lose? And potentially, what Russia could do to retaliate is start sinking Ukrainian grain ships. So ships coming from Africa and the Middle East, they sail up along NATO waters of Bulgaria, Romania. They then dock in Odessa to fill up grain exports. They then sail back out through the Black Sea. The truce has been Ukraine doesn't strike oil tankers, Russia doesn't strike grain ships. Now, Russia has struck several grain ships in the last couple of years, but those ships are usually docked at the port infrastructure while Russia's trying to blow up the port infrastructure. So we don't know what Russia's response is going to be. The truce might be off, and Russia might start sinking grain ships. And they don't have to sink empty ships. They can wait for the grain ships to fill up. I do believe that the Black Sea still has an operational submarine somewhere in the waters. And I've seen the clips on Kremlin State TV of Solyov saying they would just release mines in the path of the ship. Their submarines would go in undetected, release mines, and start sinking grain ships. Will Russia do it? The consequences would be famine and food insecurity in Africa and the Middle East. But what are the consequences of sinking oil ships? It's China and India not getting the oil they want. But let's actually think about the numbers. Russia exports approximately between 3 and 4 million barrels per day. That number is going down as Ukraine continues striking energy infrastructure. But out of the port city of Novorossiysk, it was estimated in October of 2025, 761,000 barrels per day were being exported. So that is about 25 to 30% of Russia's total oil exports. They were just cut off. Think about all of the oil revenue that Russia brings in by exporting through the Black Sea. It's about a third, and Ukraine just shut it off for the rest of the war until Russia stops. This is going to be a disaster. This could potentially be bad for Ukraine. They're not going to get their food exports out. But Russia's not going to get their oil exports out now. I've got a lot more bad news for you, so let's continue. I want to remind everyone that Ukraine is launching their own domestically produced drones and missiles into Russia nightly, and they're having great success. Russia's Saratov refinery among key targets hit by drones last night. This is the pictures and videos showing the refinery on fire in the distance. This is where Saratov is located on the map of Russia. And we can go to the bingo board, and this is now the most struck refinery on the board. The Saratov is 590 kilometers from Ukraine, produces 7 million tons of products per year, and Ukraine has now struck it this month on the 28th, the 14th, the 11th, and the 3rd. 4 times in a single month, 11 times total. So there is something critical about this refinery where Russia wants to continue operating, and Ukraine wants to take it offline. Ukrainian drones torch Russian oil refinery and Tu-95 bomber repair shop in a coordinated strike. This is the Afivsky oil refinery, and it's definitely on fire again. This is the video showing the refinery fire, and with these attacks, we don't really know the extent of the damage. But look at the size of that fire from easily 5 kilometers away. This is a massive fireball at this refinery, and we'll never know what the true extent of the damage is, just whether or not it can continue processing. So the Afivsky refinery, it's now been struck 6 times, as recently as September 26th and August 28th. Drone attack forces oil terminal in Russia's Novorossiysk to halt all loading operations. Again, this port was struck 2 or 3 weeks ago to devastating effect, but Ukraine struck it again with drones last night, and now the oil terminal is not operational. It's not filling up ships. So all of the equipment located here on the satellite images, this was destroyed by a Neptune missile. Huge fireball. Lots of explosions, but somehow Russia was still filling up ships. Not at the same rate. People told me in the comments section that basically the pipe upstream can apply pressure, and as long as there's not holes in the pipe, they can still get it into the ship, just not as efficiently, and maybe they don't know how much they're putting in because the metering equipment was destroyed. But Ukraine struck the port again, and now nothing is filling up. In addition to Shadow Fleet tankers that are empty coming in through Turkey, I assume Ukraine's going to continue hitting them. Why would they stop? Ukraine also has been striking successfully electrical substations. This is in Belgorod, showing 2 different substations that were destroyed by Ukrainian drones last night. This is in the city of Kazan, and the city was without power. Ukraine struck electrical substations, and there's some fascinating videos where as soon as the drone makes impact, there's this huge blue light, a huge blue aura that covers the city, and then the city plunges into darkness. They lose complete power. Kazan is located right here on the map, and this is a massive city. It's 1.3 million people, and this is where a lot of Russia's military industrial base is located. So if factories are without power, they can't produce weapons for Russia's military. But this is all part of a coordinated campaign that's now been going on for months. Ukraine has struck 39 energy infrastructure targets across Russia over the last 55 days, including 12 thermal power plants, 27 substations, with recent focus shifting to 15 objects in the occupied territories. So yes, Ukraine is going after the border regions where a lot of Russian troops are located. They're also taking shots at the capital city in Moscow. But at the moment, they're focusing on the occupied territories. Look at these cluster of attacks in Donetsk and Luhansk. Ukraine is trying to finish off the electrical infrastructure of the occupied territories because there's over 700, 800,000 Russian soldiers living in these occupied territories. If they have electricity and they have power, they're charging phones, they're charging radios, they're charging batteries. Something tells me that Russia doesn't have as many generators as Ukraine does, because Ukraine has been buying them for 4 years, and I don't think Russia ever expected this would happen, that Ukraine would have their own long-range strike capability to destroy their electrical infrastructure. There's also this warehouse that was storing batteries in Alabuga. This is a special economic zone, and the factory's on fire. The factory produces components for Shahed drones, so potentially this was sabotage or some kind of Ukrainian agent who started a fire in the factory. Ukraine's drones cripple 60 million of Russian air defenses in just 3 days. Ukraine's unmanned systems forces said they destroyed 3 high-value Russian air defense systems worth 60 million, a Buk M1, a Buk M2, and a Tor M2 over a 3-day blitz. There's a video on Euromaidan Press's website showing the FP1 camera video slamming into the air defense systems. I can link this down below if you want to check it out. We solved a mystery. Where are the Flamingo cruise missiles? This was Ukraine back in September or August saying by November or December they would be mass producing 6, 7, 8 of these Flamingo cruise missiles a day. Now the production, that's the good news. The production is still going on. But the man in this video, this is Dennis Stillerman. He is co-owner and chief designer of the Firepoint company, and he solves the mystery. Where are the Flamingo cruise missiles? When we have maps with accurate elevations, we will be able to avoid terrain features and perform map matching based on the TERCOM system, which has been in operation since the late 1980s. Unfortunately, Ukraine currently does not have accurate terrain maps of the Russian Federation, which prevents it from avoiding terrain and flying based on the TERCOM system. But this issue is being resolved very quickly by the military, and I hope that it will be resolved in the near future, and we are very grateful for that, because everyone understands how important it is, and it's important not only for our missile, but for all of our missiles. The question and regarding breakthrough effectiveness. If you saw how our missile was intercepted at an altitude of 114 meters, they already barely see it. We are conducting tests, I won't say much, but at an altitude of 30 to 40 meters above the ground. No one will see it from the ground. The only chance is if there is an interceptor in the air with a new high-quality radar. only then it can be seen. Ukraine doesn't have accurate terrain maps of the Russian Federation. They could start launching these Flamingos at 100 meters above the ground, but they would be easier to detect and easier to shoot down. What Ukraine wants is for these cruise missiles to be cruising at only 30 meters above the ground. You got to avoid buildings, you got to avoid tall trees, hills, whatever. This is what Ukraine is saving their Flamingo missiles for. And I want to remind everyone, the payload of an FP-1 or FP-2 drone is like 100 kilograms, 200 kilograms. The Flamingo is 1,000 kilograms. These missiles are base destroyers. They're building destroyers. And Ukraine has been producing 5, 6, 7, 8 of these a day. They just don't have the guidance systems calibrated yet for Russia's terrain. But they say they're working on it now. They're going to have the data input so that these Flamingos can start flying. Maybe a Christmas present? I don't know, guys. After making these update videos for 4 years, I am looking forward to this day. Under no circumstances should Ukraine take any bogus peace deal from the United States when they're on the cusp of these things being unleashed on Russian military bases. I want to see this happen at this point. More bad news for Russia. Purple plume over Russian test sites after suspected Sarmat ICBM launch failure. It's not a Sarmat, it's a UR-100N. This is a Russian intercontinental ballistic missile. And if you want, we can watch it explode together. This is very embarrassing for the Russians, and I thoroughly enjoy it. Once again, nobody harmed, nobody killed. I can show this video.
Да ну нахуй. Да ну нахуй. Что за... Давай. А, нихуя, я думал вниз полетит.
Упало что-то.
Да это...
Давай, да, пизда.
В натуре?
Да. Ты чё, она падает уже всё.
Ебать.
Держись.
Да ну нахуй.
For those of you unfamiliar with ICBMs, that was not supposed to happen. It was not supposed to rip apart in midair 20 seconds after takeoff and then fall to the ground in a fireball. We already have the satellite images of the test launch site. This is where it was launched from, and there's the crater in the ground where it landed. And yes, Russia has serious problems with their ICBM fleet. They've now had multiple consecutive failures to launch. The most recent one I can remember was a year ago. Russia's new Sarmat ballistic missile blows up during test launch. This missile blew up in the silo, destroying the whole facility. So this time I think Russia tried to put it above ground, and it still failed. This is incredibly embarrassing for the Russian strategic rocket forces. Here's a map showing what the flight path was supposed to be like, and this is fascinating for me, as I was a former missileer in the US Air Force. But in the United States, we launch from California, and we go over the Pacific to the Kwajalein Atoll. The Russians basically launch from the border with Kazakhstan, and then they go all the way to Kamchatka, to test the full length of the ICBM. But here's the conclusion of this failed test launch. If this is indeed another Sarmat failure, it would be highly detrimental to the medium-term future of Russian deterrence. The aging R-36M2 missiles, which carry a significant portion of Russia's strategic warheads, are seeing their replacement pushed even further into the future, while their maintenance, previously handled by Ukraine until 2014, remains highly uncertain. Russia's strategic ICBM fleet up to 2014 was being maintained by Ukraine. And since then, things are breaking down, things are falling apart. I've been saying this here on the channel for the last 4 years, but people always ask, what would the failure rate be if Russia launched everything? It would be high, greater than 50%. which is why the Russians always compensate for their incompetence with quantity. They have poor quality, but they just make as many as they can to compensate. It gets worse. Russian rocket damages Baikonur launch pad despite successful liftoff. The accidental destruction of the launch pad on Thursday might mark the first time since 1961 that Russia is unable to send crewed missions into space. This is the test launch, or the launch pad for their manned missions to the International Space Station, and something did not go correct. Thankfully, no astronauts were killed. I don't want to see any astronauts die, guys. But when the rocket took off, the launch pad basically fell apart. You can see all this debris that fell down there. I can show you. This is the blast area. The rocket takes off and the exhaust gets shot down here. But this is the structure that the rocket takes off from, and it fell over. It fell into the pit. This is just another thing in the Russian system that has not been properly maintained for decades, and Russia keeps pushing it. Russia keeps doing things that are not safe because they want to maintain their prestige and image. When all of Russia is collapsing, all of Russia is currently failing, and you don't get more symbolic than this, where it's going to take time and money to repair this launch pad. And in the meantime, Russia can no longer send their cosmonauts to the International Space Station. They can't send people into space for the first time in 60 years. Russia's war machine is running out of cash and out of illusions. Moscow resorts to printing money as state railways drown in debt, oil revenues plunge 35%, and even China exploits Russia's desperation. It's worse than 35%. Russia's Rosneft reports 70% fall in 9-month net income. Here's the chart showing Rosneft's net profits in billions of rubles. Going back to Q1 of 2024, they were looking pretty good, 399. Oil price was high. Russia's shadow fleet was functioning. Fast forward to Q3, drops down. And this should say Q3 of 2025, but only 32 billion rubles. And shrinking. What is Rosneft's excuse? Rosneft says costs for anti-terror security have increased significantly, meaning Ukraine has stepped up their drone attacks. No, I don't think putting up cages and scaffolding and nets is why there's no profit left. It's because their oil refineries are being blown up. In general, all of Russia's state industries are falling behind on their payments. Russian state-owned companies are out of money and not paying their suppliers. All of last year, there were complaints of about 1.5 billion rubles that companies said they were owed. And in the first half of this year, it's already doubled to 3.6 billion rubles. When you don't have money, you keep ordering stuff, you then get the invoices, and you just don't pay them. This is what every Russian state company is currently doing, because they're being told by the Kremlin, you need to keep producing, you need to keep operating, we'll figure it out later. It's 2025, we've reached the later point, and nobody in Russia has figured it out. Russian industry sentiment falls to late 1990s low, according to a report. Sentiment in Russia's industrial sector fell to levels not seen since the 1990s. This is according to the Institute of Economic Forecasting of the Russian Academy of Sciences. Here's the chart showing Russian industrial optimism. It was looking pretty good in the mid-2000s, looking pretty good prior to the full-scale invasion. The only two times in the last 20 years where it's been lower was COVID, and then the Great Financial Recession. But those were quick rebounds. There is no quick rebound coming for Russia. They're screwed. Putin signs law raising Russia's value-added tax to 22%. President Putin on Friday signed a major tax overhaul that will raise Russia's value-added tax to 22% from 20% next year, a move aimed at closing the fiscal gap created by soaring military expenditures and falling oil and gas revenues. More small businesses will also be swept up in the tax system under additional changes. The annual revenue threshold for companies required to pay the VAT will drop from 60 million rubles, the equivalent of 732,000 US dollars, to 10 million rubles. Meaning, the price for everything in Russia is about to go up. You have to pass along the costs of higher taxes to your customers. But now Putin is going after small businesses. If you were a small operator under a certain dollar amount of revenue, the government didn't care about you paying the VAT tax. But they're going to send out their tax police force to go after these people. And I don't think those people have a lot of extra money to give to their government so that more missiles and tanks can be blown up in Ukraine. Russia's forestry industry faces steep production slump in 2026, according to officials. Addressing a Federation Council committee, Urin said that the industry has entered a downward trend, with the worst-case scenario pointing to a 20 to 30% drop in output for 2026. Your forestry industry output is weak, Russia. It's weak. So that's what Ukraine is doing. What are the Russians doing to Ukraine? Just more terrorism. Russia strikes Kyiv overnight with drones, missiles, knocking out the power and water. Ukraine hit by 600 drones and 36 missiles overnight, 3 killed, dozens injured across multiple regions. Russia launched 632 missiles and drones. Ukraine successfully shot down 577, so that means about 60 hit their targets. Here's the map showing the concentration on the capital city of Kyiv. And this is the Russians upset that all of their rockets and missiles and important stuff is failing and collapsing and blowing up. And they think they can feel better about themselves by killing some women and children in the capital city of Kyiv. Here is President Zelensky. In Kyiv and the region, our emergency services are working at the sites of the Russian strikes. The Russians have launched about 36 missiles and almost 600 drones against ordinary life. The main targets of the attack were energy infrastructure and civilian facilities, with extensive damage and fires in residential buildings. We currently have reports of dozens injured and 3 killed. My condolences to their families and loved ones. There are videos. These were Russian drones slamming into random apartment buildings in Kyiv. Terrorism is the only thing Russia feels they have left. They don't know how to militarily win this war. And the goal is civilian casualties. The Russians are now jamming into their Shahid drones cluster munitions. The purpose of cluster munitions is to kill as many civilians as possible. There's no other point to putting cluster munitions in Shahid drones that slam into apartment buildings. So I'm going to share with you the face of 2 of the victims. This is 6-year-old Vladislav. He was killed by the Russians along with his 34-year-old mother, Alina. Who would negotiate with these evil people? Who would want to have business ties with people who use cluster munitions to kill children? Trump envoy offers Putin U.S. recognition of Crimea annexation in leaked peace plan. The Trump administration has sent Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff to Moscow with an offer to recognize Russian control over Crimea, Donetsk, and Luhansk, breaking decades of U.S. policy against legitimizing territory seized by force. This is in violation of the UN Charter. The United States is supposed to be a founding member of the UN on their Security Council, and the number one rule in the post-World War II era is you cannot redraw the maps by force. You cannot invade your neighbor and steal their land. That's what the Japanese did. That's what Hitler and the Nazis did. The whole point of the last 80 years is to break that cycle of empire. People making historical claims and then saying, I have a right to invade my neighbor, kill them, and steal their land. So this is how the Ukrainian population of the Donbass feels. This is a Ukrainian soldier with a message from my president. Mr. Trump, I'm from Donbass. Why should I give my home and my region to Russia? This isn't a land deal. This is not a real estate deal. These are people. These people are connected to their land. And right now, the Ukrainian people in the Donbass region, they live in a democracy. They live in a free society. It's not perfect, but it's a hell of a lot better than living in Russia. In Russia, you have no rights, you have no free speech, you have no protection, you have no representative government. You live in a shitty dictatorship where they're going to press gang you into the military eventually and send you to die if you're poor. So this is the big scandal from the last 2 days. This story should not go away. This is the Wall Street Journal reporting that there is no peace plan. The only purpose of Steve Witkoff is to orchestrate business deals with the Russian state to enrich Trump's children and his campaign donors. Now, I can link the article down below, but I'm not going to pay Rupert Murdoch to read the Wall Street Journal. There are screenshots of the article all over social media. I can link this down below if you want to read the specifics, but I can give you the details. The Wall Street Journal reports that the main focus of the US-Russia peace talks is to get commercial advantage for American companies and personal benefits for individuals linked to the Trump administration. European officials are said to be shocked by the plans. This is the Europeans leaking this information to the Wall Street Journal. Steve Witkoff is such an idiot. He has conversations with people on unencrypted devices. So, of course, Steve Witkoff's phone is being recorded by British intelligence, French intelligence, whoever. And the Europeans know exactly who Trump is and what he's currently trying to do. According to the Wall Street Journal, talks between Trump's golfing friend Steve Witkoff, his son-in-law Jared Kushner, and the Russian envoy Kirill Dmitriev have bypassed the U.S. national security and diplomatic apparatuses to focus on economic benefits for well-connected American companies. The paper reports that a cast of businessmen close to the Trump administration have been looking to position themselves as new economic links between the United States and Russia. Friends of the Trump family and Trump donors are working on lucrative deals with Russian companies. Anticipating the removal of U.S. sanctions, Gentry Beach, a Trump donor and college friend of Don Jr., has been in talks to acquire 9.9% of an Arctic liquid national gas project with the Russian company Novatech. Other businessmen have been involved in similar talks. They include executives from ExxonMobil, mining companies, and investment funds, which have been offered stakes in Russian energy production, mines, and pipelines. Rare earth production has been a particular focus of interest, as well as gas concessions in the Sea of Okhotsk. Another Trump donor, Stephen Lynch, paid $600,000 this year to a lobbyist close to Trump Jr., who is helping him get a Treasury Department license to buy the Nord Stream 2 pipeline from Russia. Every decision that Donald Trump makes, it's about enriching his corrupt children, enriching his friends, and enriching his campaign donors. All of these meetings between Steve Witkoff and the Russians, they're not talking about peace. There's nothing to talk about. They don't care about Ukraine. It's about business deals, preferential business deals, to screw over the Europeans, by the way. The purpose of the Nord Stream pipeline was not affordable energy for Germany. It was economic leverage over the European continent. The Russians shut off the pipeline. Yes, somebody blew it up, but they shut off the pipeline to get Europe to submit. Do not help Ukraine. Stop helping Ukraine, allow us to win, and we'll turn the pipeline back on. So if Donald Trump now controls this pipeline, that's leverage over Europe. Europe, you have to give me what I want, you have to pay up, otherwise I'll shut off the pipeline. This is something America could do to Europe 5 or 10 years from now or whatever, but it's the same thing. The Russians and the Trump family, they think the same. They operate the same. They're all corrupt. They only care about money and power. They don't care about people dying. They have no morals. So what do the Russians think of this Wall Street Journal article? Putin defends Witkoff against accusations of pro-Russia bias. The Russian leader called the U.S. Special Envoy an intelligent man who is properly representing his country in peace negotiations. So the corrupt mass murderer likes you. The corrupt mass murderer thinks you're an intelligent man. That should be a red flag for everyone. And as an American, I'm sorry. This is all a sham. This morning, the Ukrainian delegation met with Trump's peace negotiators, and this is Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. We know now, Steve Witkoff is compromised. He is representing Russia's best interests, as well as Trump's campaign donors, Trump's children, Trump's golf buddies from Mar-a-Lago. They're all just thinking about how they can get rich with the Russians once all these sanctions are lifted. That is their only interest. And why is Jared Kushner there? He doesn't speak Russian. He's never been to Ukraine. He's not been part of the process at all this entire year. And he just airdrops out of nowhere because he thinks he'll be able to make billions of dollars once this war is settled somehow. Marco Rubio is the only somewhat sane person representing the American people, representing American interests. Everyone else in the Trump administration, they're just engaging in blind corruption. So the Ukrainians have to sit there and they have to pretend like this is a legitimate process, when all they're trying to do is placate Trump so he will continue selling weapons to the Europeans that are being delivered to Ukraine. There's also intelligence sharing, but that's it. That's the only reason why Ukraine is entertaining any of this. And they know. This is Umarov leading the delegation. They know exactly who Steve Witkoff is. They know exactly who Donald Trump is. But they still have to play this game. They still have to engage with the United States when we're just a mafia state. The United States, our democracy at the moment has fallen. It's been captured by corrupt criminals. They're only looking to empower and enrich themselves at the expense of our allies, at the expense of ordinary Americans. Trump voters are being screwed right now, everywhere, in every way. Trump family doesn't care. They're going to make billions over the next 4 years, and then they're all going to pardon themselves before leaving office. It's a smash and grab. And even if American businessmen close to Trump think they're going to benefit by partnering with the Russians, they won't. This is Sir William Browder. I want to read for you what he says. The Wall Street Journal alleges that the real motivation behind Trump's eagerness to force Ukraine into an ugly surrender is the idea that a lot of people close to him can make a lot of money doing business deals with the Russians. If this is true, beyond the disgusting morality of this and the huge geopolitical risks that it creates, none of these people salivating over their future riches are going to make a penny, and perhaps do a lot worse. I was once the largest foreign investor in Russia, and I can say with certainty that the Russians aren't going to let anyone profit in any way. They will talk nice at the outset to attract the investment, but once it's there, they will steal, defraud, arrest, torture, and even kill to make sure that no American makes any money. I've seen it so many times, it's almost universal. So this shocking initiative is not only terrible policy, it's spectacularly stupid business. Who is dumb enough to do business with the Russians and think they're going to get rich? It's Jared Kushner. And it's Steve Witkoff. Because they're idiots. They're all idiots, guys. And what's Donald Trump doing today? He closed the airspace over Venezuela. To all airlines, pilots, please consider the airspace above and surrounding Venezuela to be closed in its entirety. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Donald Trump wants to invade Venezuela to steal their oil and natural resources. Yes, Venezuela is a corrupt dictatorship. Maduro is close to the Russians. I don't like this guy. I support democracy in Venezuela. But that is not what Trump and his goons are trying to do. They want to invade Venezuela so they can get rich. They can steal Venezuela's natural resources. Is Trump actually going to pull the trigger and invade Venezuela? He's acting like it. The United States Navy has been building up their forces in the Caribbean for over 3 months now, preparing for this invasion. I'm resisting him, guys. I am doing everything I think I can do to stop this. But 30% of my fellow Americans live in a cult, and they are delusional, lost people. I'm done, guys. One piece of huge good news. Germany approves the 2026 budget with 11.5 billion euros for Ukraine. This was announced by Ukraine's defense minister. Ukraine will receive a record 11.5 billion from Germany for artillery, drones, military equipment, and other gear. The lower house of the German parliament approved the budget for 2026. Thank you so much to the fantastic people of Germany. Final video, just for fun. This is what they use for food dishes for their trench cats.
Продам 2 кормушки для котов. Да? Да, вон твоя, да. Кушай тут, кушай. Так, 2 кормушки для котов. Пацаны, кто в теме, не мешайте бизнесу, да? О.
A lot of Ukrainian units have trench cats to help control the mice. If you don't have a cat, then mice will chew on the cables and cords, they'll get into the food. They're also nice just to have, companionship a little bit. That's all for this update video. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. If you found this video informative, give me a thumbs up. Best way to support the channel. Comments and questions, let me know down below. I love hearing from you guys. Till the next video, keep defending the truth, keep defending democracy.